For 3 decades, The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson was the gold standard of late-night television. Night after night, millions of viewers watched Carson deliver his opening monologue before welcoming Hollywood's biggest stars to his famous desk. To audiences at home, everything appeared effortless. Conversations flowed naturally, laughter came easily, and every episode seemed perfectly controlled. Behind the scenes, however, reality was often far less predictable. The Tonight Show attracted the world's most famous entertainers, actors, comedians, musicians, authors, and cultural icons. While many guests arrived prepared and professional, others stepped onto the stage after drinking heavily or using recreational drugs. Production staff quickly learned that live television could become unpredictable at any moment. According to former crew members, Johnny Carson possessed an extraordinary ability to read people. Within seconds of greeting a guest, he could often tell whether someone was nervous, intoxicated, or under the influence of something stronger. Rather than embarrassing them, Carson usually adjusted his interviewing style, helping the conversation stay on track while making the situation appear completely natural to viewers. Over the years, the production team even developed subtle methods for dealing with difficult situations. Camera operators, directors, and producers watched carefully for warning signs before guests walked onto the stage. Backup plans were always ready in case an interview suddenly became chaotic. The reason was simple. During the 1970s and early 1980s, substance use was common throughout the entertainment industry. Many celebrities viewed alcohol or drugs as a way to calm their nerves before facing millions of television viewers. Unlike modern talk shows, Carson preferred spontaneous conversations rather than carefully rehearsed interviews. Guests never knew exactly what questions he would ask, making even experienced performers anxious. For some, a drink or something stronger seemed like the easiest way to relax. The Green Room became famous for its fully stocked bar, where celebrities gathered before appearing on camera. Although staff expected guests to drink responsibly, enforcing those expectations with major Hollywood stars wasn't always possible. Carson himself enjoyed an occasional drink, but colleagues consistently described him as someone who remained remarkably composed while working. That self-control allowed him to recognize immediately when a guest had gone too far. His calm professionalism would be tested repeatedly throughout his career. One of Carson's most frequent guests was legendary comedian George Carlin. During the early years of his career, Carlin had cultivated a clean-cut image. By the 1970s, however, he had completely reinvented himself. His appearance changed, his comedy became sharper, and he openly embraced the counterculture movement that defined the decade. Many people who worked on The Tonight Show believed Carlin often appeared after using marijuana. The comedian never seemed interested in hiding it. Instead, his relaxed personality became part of the image audiences expected. Unlike many impaired guests, Carlin rarely appeared confused or out of control. His quick wit remained intact, and his brilliant observations often became even more imaginative. Rather than struggling through interviews, he delivered thoughtful conversations filled with humor and social commentary. Carson understood exactly how to interview him. Instead of interrupting Carlin with rapid questions, Carson introduced broad topics and allowed the comedian to speak freely. The result was a series of memorable interviews where Carlin explored everything from politics and language to everyday life. Crew members later recalled that Carson never treated Carlin's relaxed demeanor as a problem because his professionalism never disappeared. Even if he appeared unusually mellow, he consistently entertained the audience. Years later, Carlin openly acknowledged that marijuana had been part of his lifestyle during that era, confirming what many viewers had already suspected. If George Carlin represented controlled confidence, Richard Pryor represented unpredictability. Widely considered one of history's greatest comedians, Pryor possessed extraordinary talent, but also struggled with addiction throughout much of his career. His battles with cocaine became increasingly public during the late 1970s, and those struggles occasionally influenced his television appearances. Former staff members remembered that Pryor could begin an interview brilliantly before suddenly losing focus midway through the conversation. His thoughts sometimes wandered unexpectedly, leaving audiences unsure whether they were watching carefully planned comedy or genuine confusion. Whenever that happened, Carson quietly stepped in. Instead of drawing attention to awkward moments, he redirected the conversation with another question or introduced a joke that helped everyone move forward naturally. If necessary, he shortened interviews without making viewers aware that anything unusual had happened. People who worked behind the scenes admired Carson's ability to protect his guests. Rather than exploiting Pryor's vulnerable moments for ratings, Carson emphasized his remarkable talent while minimizing situations that might embarrass him. Friends later recalled that Carson genuinely respected Pryor and worried about the personal struggles affecting his career. Even during difficult appearances, Carson treated him with patience and compassion. Author Truman Capote had appeared on The Tonight Show many times over the years, earning a reputation as an intelligent and entertaining guest. But one appearance in 1980 became unforgettable for entirely different reasons. According to several former employees, Capote arrived in a condition that immediately concerned everyone backstage. As soon as he walked onto the set, his speech appeared slurred, his movements seemed unsteady, and maintaining a conversation became increasingly difficult. The control room quickly realized something was wrong. Carson attempted to simplify his questions while encouraging Capote to respond, but the interview became more uncomfortable with every passing minute. Viewers could sense that the conversation wasn't unfolding normally, even if they didn't fully understand why. Unlike previous situations where Carson had successfully guided guests through challenging interviews, this time there was little he could do. Behind the scenes, producers reportedly decided the segment needed to end as quickly as possible. Commercial breaks arrived sooner than planned, allowing the production team to regain control of the broadcast. Former staff later suggested that Carson viewed the incident differently from many earlier cases. In his opinion, there was an important distinction between someone who remained capable of entertaining despite being under the influence and someone who could no longer participate in a meaningful conversation. Following the appearance, backstage procedures reportedly became stricter. Staff members were encouraged to pay closer attention to guests before they entered the studio, helping producers identify potential problems earlier. Unlike other guests who attempted to hide their relationship with recreational drugs, comedy duo Cheech Marin and Tommy Chong built their entire careers around cannabis culture. Their movies, stand-up routines, and public image openly celebrated that lifestyle, making it impossible for audiences to separate the comedians from their famous on-stage personas. Rather than pretending nothing was happening, Carson cleverly embraced the situation. He often played the role of the straight-laced television host who seemed confused by their jokes and slang. His innocent questions gave Cheech and Chong opportunities to expand on their comedy while allowing the audience to enjoy the contrast between Carson's traditional style and the duo's laid-back personalities. Their appearances became some of the show's funniest interviews because everyone understood the joke, including Carson himself. Instead of criticizing or exposing them, he allowed them to remain authentic while carefully keeping the conversation suitable for network television. It perfectly demonstrated Carson's greatest strength as an interviewer. He understood that every guest required a different approach. Rather than forcing celebrities into the same interview format, he adapted his style to match each personality, creating conversations that felt genuine, entertaining, and unforgettable. That remarkable ability would face even greater challenges with several other famous guests whose appearances pushed live television to its absolute limits. As the 1970s unfolded, Johnny Carson became more than just America's favorite late-night host. He also became an expert at navigating unpredictable live television. Every interview brought a new personality and, occasionally, a new challenge. While some guests remained composed despite appearing under the influence, others pushed Carson's legendary patience to its limits. One of the most unusual interviews involved actor Peter Fonda. By the early 1970s, Fonda had become a symbol of the counterculture movement thanks to films like Easy Rider. He was outspoken about personal freedom and closely associated with the psychedelic culture that defined the era. According to several people who worked on The Tonight Show, one appearance quickly stood out from the rest. From the moment Fonda entered the stage, crew members sensed something was unusual. Instead of focusing on Carson's questions, he often seemed distracted by the studio lights and the audience around him. His answers wandered from one subject to another, making the interview increasingly difficult to follow. Carson immediately recognized that a standard conversation wasn't going to work. Rather than asking complex questions, he kept the discussion simple and tried to guide Fonda toward familiar topics. Unfortunately, the actor's attention continued drifting, and his responses became increasingly philosophical, eventually moving far away from the original conversation. Realizing the interview could become confusing for viewers, Carson quietly wrapped up the segment earlier than planned. There was no public criticism, no embarrassing confrontation, and no attempt to shame his guest. Instead, the show simply moved forward, allowing the audience to remember the moment as another unusual chapter in live television history. Interestingly, Carson never held the incident against Fonda. He welcomed him back on future occasions after the actor appeared in a much more relaxed and focused state. If Fonda's appearance tested Carson's patience, British actor Oliver Reed tested something entirely different. Reed was already famous for his larger-than-life personality and reputation for heavy drinking long before he arrived on The Tonight Show. Unfortunately, those stories appeared to follow him onto Carson's stage. Unlike previous guests who were simply relaxed or distracted, Reed quickly became loud, argumentative, and increasingly difficult to manage. His interruptions made it nearly impossible for Carson to maintain a normal conversation, and at one point his unpredictable behavior reportedly caused security staff to move closer to the stage as a precaution. Throughout the interview, Carson remained remarkably calm. He avoided matching Reed's aggression and instead tried to redirect the discussion whenever possible. When it became obvious that the situation was no longer under control,